Alright, so today we are starting with chapter 9 from the syllabus and the text, which is titled Human Gas Exchange. Let's put it up here. Now, in the text, they start off by talking about the importance of gas exchange and the features of respiratory surfaces. I will come to that later. I'm going to start off by talking about the structure of the lungs. So, why is gas exchange important? And that's because right through gas exchange, right, or otherwise known as breathing, right, this helps enable life. Why? Because the oxygen present in the air that we breathe in is utilized in the process of respiration, which provides energy, and that energy is used to sustain metabolism. It's a metabolic activity. And functioning overall. So right, movement, growth, reproduction, all of that. So that's why, and then right, as a consequence of gas exchange, CO2 is produced, which is a metabolic waste. And as we talked about in the previous chapter, if it is a metabolic waste product, it is excreted. So when we exhale, right, we're actually excreting the carbon dioxide via the lungs and then the nostrils of the mouth, right? Obviously the air that we take in is also from the lungs, so that's right. So this is the main player in the process of gas exchange in humans or mammals, right? Or vertebrates. So obviously we're going to talk about humans because that is the heading. And so let's talk about the structure of the lungs. So the first thing we know is that we've got a pair of lungs in the chest, right, or more formally known as the thoracic cavity, right, or even shorter, it is known as the chest area is known as the thorax. The lungs have a spongy texture, so they're soft. They're not exactly elastic, right, but they can be expanded and compressed. Expanded, right, you could say that they are inflated with air, and compressed, you could say that they are deflated, so the air is removed. So they can be expanded and compressed, but that happens through the movement of muscles and the bones. Right, so
Like they expand while inhaling, no?
yes. So the movement of the bones and muscles in the thorax, right? These involve the ribs, those are the bones, the intercostal muscles, these are the muscles between the ribs, and the diaphragm, which is also a muscular sort of dome at the bottom of the uh, thoracic cavity. So diaphragm. Okay. So when you talked about the digestive system, we saw the uh, alimentary canal, and we know that, right, the mouth connects not only to the esophagus but also to the air passages. So from the mouth, right, the very first part of the air passage is the larynx. Right, this is at the back. This is where, like, found at the back of the mouth. And then this leads down to our main uh, air passage, also known as the windpipe, right, which is called the trachea. So that is the main air passage. The trachea divides into the left and right bronchi, right? So these are smaller passages, right? These are smaller tubes, and bronchi is plural. The singular for this is bronchus, right? So these are smaller tube air passages, and then the bronchi on each side, so the left and right, they divide into even, or they branch into even smaller air passages, which are about zero point 0.2 millimeter in diameter. And these are called the bronchioles. Again, that is plural. Singular would be a bronchiole only without the s. And then these branches end in thin walled air sacs, thin walled air sacs, which are called alveoli, alveoli, or the singular alveolus, right, us at the end. And so there are multiples of thousands of these alveoli in each lung, right, giving you uh, a total surface area. So these alveoli, right, from both lungs give a total surface area of about 90 meters squared, which is a lot, right? So I said multiples of thousands, right? It's actually 350 million alveoli in both the lungs combined, and that is giving you this very, very large surface area for gas exchange, right? And so you can imagine how efficient the gas exchange is going to be. But that's not the only thing that makes it efficient. Okay, the epithelium, right, which means the cells that make up the wall of the alveolus. So we just talked about the large surface area, right? The epithelium is very thin. So thin walled, the epithelium of the alveoli is only one cell thick. Similar to the walls of the blood capillaries, they're also one cell thick, similar to the walls of the villi in the intestine, right? And so what this does is that it greatly reduces the diffusing distance, right? And we know that the diffusion is effective over short ranges. So, right, basically there's only a two cell layer that oxygen has to pass through. You put oxygen coming into the lungs, it passes through, diffuses through the epithelium of alveoli, and then through the epithelium of the capillaries, and then it's reached the blood, right? So you can see that's a very short distance. This is a single layer of cells. This is a single layer of cells, right? And so that has to pass through, and so that maximizes the efficiency of gas exchange because it's happening, right? Gas exchange is happening via diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So far so good.
Yes.
Okay, now, right, what also helps in the efficiency of gas exchange is that there is a very good blood supply. And just like we talked about in the villi, that the blood is continuously flowing and that maintains a concentration gradient which helps in diffusion, right? Same thing's happening over here. So there's a very good blood supply to the alveoli, surrounding the alveoli. Right, and this helps maintain the maintaining the diffusion gradient, maintaining diffusion gradient. Right, for both oxygen and carbon dioxide. And then,
Do you inhale carbon dioxide?
I'm sorry, your voice was breaking up. Could you repeat that?
Do humans inhale carbon dioxide?
We inhale carbon dioxide in the sense that carbon dioxide is present in air, right? So the composition of air is about 78 to 79% nitrogen, right? 21% is oxygen, and I believe 0.04% is carbon dioxide, right? So there is carbon dioxide in the air that we inhale, and right, we exhale a lot more. So if we go into those numbers, right, the air that we take in is called inspired air, right? So this is the one we take in, and the air that we remove is called expired air, right? And so breathing in is called inspiration. This is breathing in, and breathing out is called expiration. And so the air we breathe in has, right, we're not talking about nitrogen because nitrogen isn't really involved in like any gas exchange, right? So it's 78%, it stays 78%. It's not involved. For the inspired air, it has 21% O2. And carbon dioxide is about 0.04. So CO2 is 0.04%. And then there's water vapor, right? So gaseous water. And that is, it's variable. There's no fixed percentage that makes up the air, or you need this much water vapor in air to be, a proper mixture. No, right? The percentages of nitrogen, which I haven't written it, I told you, right? 78%. O2 and CO2, these are pretty much constant in the air. Water vapor depends. In expired air, the percentage of oxygen is 16%. So a lot of it is used, but not all of it. It's not that it falls to zero or like only 1-2%. 5% of the O2 we take in is used, right? And 5% as in from the compared to the total in the air, right? So, and the percentage of carbon dioxide that we exhale is 4%, right? So you're taking in 0.04% and you're exhaling 4%. That is 100 times more carbon dioxide, right? This is 100 times more. And in case of water vapor, again, we're not giving a percentage, but it's saturated. So there's a lot more water vapor in the air that we expire, that we breathe out, as compared to the air generally, unless like it's very humid, right? And there's a lot of water vapor in the air anyway. That's a different matter. But generally, right, the expired air has a lot more water vapor as compared to the inspired air. Any questions?
No.
Right? And another thing that expired air has is heat. And so through breathing, right, heat is lost from the body. So the expired air is warmer as compared to the air you take in. Right. That brings us to ventilation. Right? So we talked about breathing in and breathing out. And so ventilation is the process of air moving into and out of our lungs. So that is another feature that helps in gas exchange, and that is simply the movement of air into and out of our lungs. And the term for that is ventilation. So how does it help? Again, it helps to maintain, just like the blood supply, it helps to maintain the diffusion gradient. Because when the air becomes like the percentages change, the air is breathed out and the new air is brought in, which has higher O2 and much less CO2, and so O2 can be absorbed into the blood, and then the CO2 that the blood has can be removed. Keep in mind that, right, practically not all, and this is something I don't believe it's in your book, right? Not all the O2 absorbed is used, and not all the CO2 produced in the body is removed, right? So if you choose to take A level biology, you will learn that a certain amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide stays in the blood that is not being utilized, right? And these gases affect the chemistry of the blood. So, right, it's like nowhere in any system you're going to go from like 100 to 0, right? You're not going to find fluctuations like that. You're going to go up till maybe, let's say, oh, you've got 67% and you're going down to maybe 43%. And so you're going to have changes in that, like for example, I'm just like to explain, right? In that sort of domain, right? And so you never have like 0 in balanced working systems. I'm not talking about deficiencies or something being more than it's required. So you're not never going to have 0, and you're never going to like use all of something. You're going to be somewhere in between, and these are maintained within certain levels, right, for reasons to maintain overall balance due to the chemistry or the physiology or whatever it is, right? And they tie into the system of homeostasis, which we'll talk about later, right? And homeostasis basically means to maintain stability within the body. Okay, to loosely say it, maintaining stability, right, of different things, such as how much sugar is there in your blood or how much water is there in your body. Anyway, right, so that was a bit of digression. So yeah, ventilation helps maintain the diffusion gradient and keep the supply of oxygen coming in and keep on removing the carbon dioxide. Now, coming back to the structure of the lung, right? Before moving on, there is a flap which I believe we were introduced to when we were talking about the alimentary canal. There's a flap of tissue, right, called the epiglottis, and that is at the back of the mouth. And what it does, it covers the larynx during swallowing of food, and this prevents any food particles or water from going into the trachea and thereby the lungs. Because if you're going to have those large particles going into the lungs, they will cause damage. Then you obviously have the rib cage, which are all the bones, right, in the chest. And they have two roles, right? So obviously they are protecting the heart and lungs because the heart's also found in the chest. So they are physically protecting and then as we'll just get to, they move to help in the process of ventilation. So they move to ventilate the lungs. Now there's a bit of description over here as to how the blood is moving from the heart to the lungs and then back to the heart. I'm not going to go over that just now because it is described again later, and in fact, better in more detail when we talk about transport in humans, right? Which is the chapter number 11, right? So I'll leave that for later. Okay. How about before continuing, I show you the diagrammatic representation of the lung. I think that would obviously help with the explanation I've been giving so far. All right. Can you see that? Can you see the, yeah, right? So this is the lung. You've got the epiglottis over here, right? On top, the larynx to begin with. Then you've got the trachea coming in. You can barely see it splitting up into the two bronchi. And then this is, these are the lungs and the hearts over there. Right? And so you're looking through the lungs and you can see the bronchi splitting up into bronchioles. And then these sacs over here are the alveoli, right? So that's like, it looks like grapes. And so each of those circles, if I zoom in, right? So those are a lot of alveoli together. Each circle represents one alveolus. On the side, you can see over here these alternating bands of pink and white. And so those are representing the ribs, right? So the white one is the rib, and then the pink one are the intercostal muscles, right? And we'll talk about those when we talk about the process of ventilation. And then over here, you've got this muscular layer called the diaphragm, which also plays a part in our breathing movement. Right here, we can see the right blood supply uh, surrounding the different alveoli. So this one blob over here is one alveolus, and so there are multiple alveoli, and you can see how densely they are covered with capillaries. They're red and blue. The red or the pinkish part shows capillaries that have absorbed the oxygen, like have taken up the oxygen, and so that's oxygenated blood. The blue or the lilac represent the blood that's coming in that has a higher percentage of carbon dioxide, and so that's called deoxygenated blood. So the deoxygenated blood is coming in, it is giving up its carbon dioxide, it is taking up the oxygen, it's becoming oxygenated again, and then it's going to the heart and then the rest of the body. Any questions?
Are there arteries and veins in the lungs as well?
There are arteries and veins in the lungs, yes, but at this level, the level of the alveoli, you have capillaries, right? So the way
Okay.
that goes, let's just go back to the whiteboard. Right. And so the way that works is, right, arteries, these are the ones that carry oxygenated blood, right, which basically means the blood has a high percentage of oxygen. These become smaller arterioles, so smaller arteries, and then these become capillaries, and these capillaries are the main players. This is where, right, exchange takes place, whether it's the exchange of gases or nutrients or any other substances, right, hormones or whatever, right? So exchange takes place in the capillaries, Why? Because as we just talked about, and we'll talk about again, the capillaries are only one cell thick, so the distance for diffusion is so short it makes it efficient. Now, once all the exchange, whether it's going in or out, right, whether it's going from the blood to the body cells or the body tissue, or from the body tissue into the blood, whichever way that exchange is happening, right, the capillaries join up again to make small, like larger comparatively, but venules which are small veins, and these join up to make the larger veins, and these guys are what we call carrying deoxygenated blood, right? As far as gas exchange is concerned, I'm not talking about whether arteries or veins have more nutrients or whatever, because that depends on where the artery or the vein is, right? Sometimes veins have more nutrients as compared to arteries. Why? For example, uh, if I just go back to the previous chapter's notes, we talked about the hepatic portal vein, right? So from the villi in the intestine, the capillaries join to form veins, and then they make the hepatic portal vein, which takes glucose and amino acids to the liver. So if you think that, oh, all veins have like low oxygen and low nutrients, no. The hepatic portal vein, it is a vein, and so it is low on oxygen, but it has like a very high concentration of glucose and amino acids. Why? Because that vein is coming in from the small intestine to the liver, and then it's going to carry that glucose and amino acids to the heart, and then go to the lungs. So the glucose and amino acids are being carried along with it, and then when it comes back to the heart and goes to the body, that is when those glucose and amino acids are going to be provided to the rest of the body cells. Okay, so when we talk about arteries and veins, we basically focus on their level of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, right? Not other nutrients or other hormones or uh, any other molecules. Okay,
Okay. Like, what is the size of lungs?
what is the
Size of the lung.
size of the lungs? I'll have to.
Like, are they huge or not?
They are big, yes, right? So let me just take a look. Size of human lung, right? And they are about 25 to 30 centimeters long. So if you have like a 12-inch scale, a 30 centimeter scale, and you just put it to your chest, and you would see that and they fill up most of your chest, and they are about 1.3 kilograms in weight combined, and they can hold up to 6 liters of air. That's a lot, right? And the surface area, right, of the alveoli, that 90 meters square, it's equivalent to about a tennis court. If you've ever seen a tennis court, it's big. Like people play tennis on it, and that's the surface area of the alveoli that you have in your lungs. So yeah.
Like, if a person gains weight, then does his like lungs also expand?
Well, weight, no, right? Lungs grow with a growing child, obviously, up till his early 20s, I believe. I don't know when the growth of the lungs is complete. I can look that up, right? When do lungs reach mature size? So the lungs reach their full size and function between the ages of 20 and 25. So you being a teenager, right, if your body grows naturally, right, your lungs will also grow in size to obviously accommodate for the requirement, right? When they become mature, when your body stops growing, when your body's gone through the whole growth cycle, so as your lungs and your other organs, right? Then if you gain weight, you're either putting on muscle mass or you're putting on fat, right? In either case, it's not going to affect your lungs, right? I mean, you're in the sense that they're not going to grow bigger. So if you're exercising, for
Like,
example, right, it's not going to make your lungs bigger.
why does their like weight affects their breathing and
Why does weight affect breathing? It affects breathing because uh, the when like you're putting on fat, right? And so it becomes more difficult for the muscles and the cells and everything, right? They're under pressure, they're under physical pressure, right? They're under physical strain uh, to perform properly, and they're unable to perform properly because your body is heavier. So a person who is, for example, 60, 70, 80 kilograms and they're healthy as compared to a person who is 100, maybe more, right? Just because they have more, like let's talk about this in terms of physics, right? Since you're familiar with it, they have more mass,
yeah.
right? And more mass means more weight, and weight is a force, right? And so there's more force being exerted on your body, and to move against that force, whether you're walking or running or climbing the stairs, is going to require more energy. We know that we get energy from respiration, which requires oxygen. So if you need more energy, that means that your cells require more oxygen to provide that energy for movement or for breathing or for whatever it is that you're doing. If you're playing, right, anything that involves physical activity. And so, right, that puts strain on your lungs, that you need to provide that air quickly. Now obviously there's the limit to how much air, about 5 to 6 liters of air, and not all of that is exchanged. And there's a limit to how much oxygen the blood can carry and how fast the blood. And so when a person who's overweight, they exercise, right, their heart rate goes up. Why? Because the heart is trying to blood pump blood faster around the body so that oxygen is supplied even more quickly. But there's a limit to all of this, right? And that's why our breathing becomes heavy and faster, our blood pressure goes up, and we become tired more quickly because our body ends up utilizing whatever energy the cells can produce much more quickly, because it has to work against a greater force, overcome a greater force. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It's like uh, is the cause of like asthma the same as this?
Asthma is not the same as this, right? Asthma is when, to put it simply, there's a buildup of mucus, I believe, in the passageway, and that blocks the you know path, the windpipe, right? And so you can't really breathe in properly. And it's not mucus only, right? It causes like the contraction of the trachea, and so the opening of the trachea becomes smaller, and that also causes problems with breathing.
Okay.
So a person who is not overweight can very well suffer from asthma. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Huh. So I have the process of ventilation to discuss, and right. Uh, Lung capacity and breathing rate. So we did talk about this in everything that we uh, mentioned. Now, lung capacity, which means how much air can the lung hold, and a fully inflated lung can have about 5 liters of air right? 5 to 6 liters depends. The book says 5 liters. And right, when you are at rest or sleeping, and so your body's oxygen requirement is low. At rest meaning you're not doing work. It's not like right, you're just like sitting and watching TV or reading a book. And so only about 500 centimeter cube of air is exchanged. Right? When we exercise, right, that exchange can go up to, so during physical activity, let's say, right, or anything that you're doing that requires more oxygen, again, because it requires more energy. So during physical activity, right, you can have an extra 3 liters of air being exchanged. Right, so that makes it 3.5 liters in total. What about the rest, right? It's 5 liter capacity. So there's around 1500 centimeter cube or 1.5 liters of air that always stays in the lung. Right, and we're not about one lung, we're talking about like the combined capacity of the lungs. Right, this is called residual air. And so this is the volume of air that is always present in the lungs. You cannot remove it no matter how hard you breathe out, right? No matter how hard you breathe in and breathe out. Why? Because the lungs don't completely collapse, right? They don't stick to one another. They, like when we talk about inflation and deflation, this is like when they're deflated, and this is when they're inflated, right? So there is some air left to keep them, uh, still not completely collapsed and stuck to, and like a balloon that has no air in it. You suck the air out. It's just not like that. As for the breathing rate, and that's the last thing I'll mention for today. As for the breathing rate, normally, right, the we inspire and expire about 12 times per minute. We normally breathe 12 times per minute. Right, and when I say breathe, I mean breathe in, breathe out, and inspiration and expiration, or inhalation and exhalation, right? So uh, all of these terms mean the same thing. Breathe in and inspiration and inhalation, right? And breathe out, breathe with an E at the end. Breathe out and expiration and exhalation. Right, so all of these, right, in the respective terms are the same. When we exercise, when we go into like physical activity, our breathing rate can go up to 20 breaths per minute or more. So basically, obviously more than the average 12 breaths per minute. Any questions?
No.
All right, then I'll stop here and we can continue. There isn't a lot left. Right, so we'll continue with this the next class, and right, if we have, like, if we complete it and we still have time left tomorrow, then we can even start chapter 10 and talk about respiration. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. See you next time, inshallah.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.